Welcome back to another episode of Old World USA with me, your host, Stephen Jackson. So today we're going to be exposing the history of Houston, Texas. I've brought you to the Wikipedia page that we won't remain long on, because of course it's full of lies, but we wanted to have a look at the kind of lies that they're telling. So we can see here that Houston was founded by land investors in 1836. So remember that, 1836 is when Houston was founded. Present-day Houston sits on land that was once occupied by Karankawa and the Atacapa. These are indigenous people that supposedly lived here for 2,000 years before the first known settlers arrived. So they were there for 2,000 years, and then the settlers arrived, and it says these tribes are almost non-existent today. This was most likely caused by foreign disease, competition with various lies, etc. But the land remained largely uninhabited from the late 1700s. So remember that, the late 1700s, largely uninhabited, until the 1830s. Now we're going to take a look at that and expose this history for the pack of lies that it is. So it was uninhabited from the late 1700s. So something happened in the late 1700s which caused all these people to leave until the 1830s. So bear that in mind. There's a period of time here where apparently no one is here. But before that, they were there for 2,000 years. But they didn't leave any traces. Remember that. They didn't build anything. There's no buildings, but they were here for 2,000 years. They left unexplained. They don't know why. Maybe it was disease, maybe it was various settler groups, but it's uninhabited between the late 1700s, so it's not specific, the late 1700s, so let's assume 1780s, until settlement in the 1850s. So it seems to have been uninhabited for 50 years due to some kind of event. So one of the maps that they give us, the Houston, Texas, USA, capital of the Republic of Texas in 1837. So remember, this was the capital of Texas in 1837. They said it was uninhabited until the 1830s, but within 7 years it's already the capital. We can see this is depicted here with these steamboats, etc., coming down the bayou, and the Capitol building number 1. So this is the Capitol building right here, the Capitol building, and this is what they want you to believe. But surprisingly, this is actually a bit of a lie, because this book was actually released in 2013. Mr. Gary S. Zaboli and Stephen L. Hardin, they're modern people, and this map was actually drawn as a modern day addition to their own book, so this is irrelevant, it's not real. But if you search the history, they show it you, they say, oh, this is what it looked like. But if we actually come to the wiki for the first Texas state capitol, we can see it was built in 1836 and it was somewhere completely different. This is evidently not what we've just seen. If we come to this page, we can see it clearly says an artist's depiction of the former Capitol building in Houston. So it looks very different, but this was supposedly a year before the one that we've just seen. Now we can come to this map which shows us the entire area in 1873. So this is definitely 1873. This is official. This isn't a recent depiction. This is supposedly from 1873 itself. And we can see a lot of interesting things. It gives us the references below so that we know what we're looking at. We can see the boats, the trains, and look at these houses, all the way they're placed. And notice how, on the edges, we've got the grid-like structure, even though there are no buildings. So, for some reason, they've got the structure as if there were buildings, but there are no buildings, and they'll have you believe that's because we haven't built them yet. But I think it's way more likely that these roads were there before, and they've drawn them, and the reason there are no buildings is because they've been destroyed. They've been destroyed by something, and the artist has chosen to only draw things that he can actually see that are standing. And obviously he must have been in some type of balloon for this, or airship, remember? So he's probably taking this drawing while he was flying above in some kind of airship. And remember, this is only 40 years after the town has actually started. And look at all the buildings that they've got. Look at this, all giant buildings. These aren't housing. We can see churches and things like that. Church over here, church there. This is within 40 years of... There was nobody here before, remember that. They started it in 1830. There was no one here. And in fact, we'll now have a look at some data to prove that. if we come back to the Wikipedia for Houston, we can see right here it says, about a dozen persons resided in the town at the beginning of 1837. So bear that in mind, 1837, there was only a dozen persons. Yet we've seen the Capitol buildings. We've seen the buildings that were there already. We saw that drawing, even though it wasn't official, which showed us a town. And if we come to the Houston website, the government website, houstontexas.gov, we can see the photo tour of Houston, the city plan of 1837. So this is from 1837. Supposedly only a dozen people live here. Yeah, do you want to just double check that that was exactly what was said? Just to make sure I'm not lying. About a dozen persons resided in the town at the beginning of 1837. But the number grew to about 1,500 by the time the Texas Congress convened in Houston for the first time that May. So between the beginning of 1837 and May of the same year, the town grew from a dozen persons to 1,500 within 5 months. And this is the map provided. You can see this is the original city plan in squares with all the different buildings. And this, even though it's ridiculously low quality, I do apologize, this is an 1873 map of the same area. So this is 1873, which matches the one we were just looking at, which is a high quality one. So within 40 years, they've evolved from this, supposedly, to this. They built all these gigantic buildings, which we can see are by the river, which means the ones we just saw are all these big buildings. Look, you can see them there, 1, 2, 3, 4. So these are all massive buildings. Why would they build them with only 12 people? And then 1,500, oh, we need massive buildings. What for? What did they need that for? And presumably they'd need to get there from somewhere, so these train lines, when were they built? Were they built first? Were there only 12 people here when the trains were built? And to make things even stranger, we come to this picture from 1898, so another 25 years after the last one. And whilst it's not very detailed, we'll see that Houston is the hub, with boats coming in, all the trains coming in. So bearing in mind, in 1837 there was only about a dozen people here. And then there was 1,500 within a few months. And then by 40 years later, they've essentially got a giant city, and another 20 years, they're the hub of the entire area, supposedly. That's what they want you to believe. More likely, they've dug out these railways because this place was already the hub. This was already the hub of the area before they invaded, or before some kind of cataclysm made people leave at the end of the 1700s like we saw. So now they want you to believe that this building was built by a town of only a few thousand people. We can see down here what looks like very expert electricity cables going all the way up to the building. You can see that there, the lines are going to the building. So the building is clearly electrified for whatever purpose. Perhaps this is the electricity building, this is the generator which is generating all this power. But down here, notice how we have a horse and 2 wheels, but nothing attached to it. Very strange. It's just sat there on its own. We've got 2 people here. They definitely weren't riding on the back there, so what's going on there? That looks very dodgy. More horse and carriage here. And the small buildings around the outside, we can see something industrial in the background, but this is definitely something completely different. This was here before. This is the courthouse. Again, this is 1885. So only 50 years, or 48 years to be exact, 48 years after the town has been founded, and look at that. They've already got this. And again, the cables, so it's all electrified by 1885. They've got their telephone cables, they've even got their transit system, which we'll get to in a second, but they haven't worked it out yet, and I'll show you that. But it's evidence that they couldn't have built this. This is the view from Market House Tower. Again, this is 1885, so remember 1885. And all of this, the city is going on for miles. The town was started in 1837. And yet, look at this. There's absolutely no way that this is all constructed within 50 years. It's unbelievable. Especially when horse and carriage. I mean, they've got these roads, but you're going to see there's just horse and carriage. Another view showing, the trees in the background, but these are all buildings ready. This is Capitol House, all ready to go. We can actually see the lines here. So 1885, in the road, we can see the lines for the trams, which haven't been invented yet. Again, the trams here, the view on Main Street, and horse and wagon here. Look, every side, horse and wagon, but we've got trams. Same thing here, this one, we've got a view of one of the trams. But what you're going to see is some of them are pulled by horses, because they haven't figured out the electricity properly yet. They've been rewiring it. They've been trying to figure it out. And when they get it working, they ditch the horses, and that's when you see it. So another view of the main street. Again, this is only 50 years after the town even began. There was no one here, okay? It was fields, 50 years ago. Fields. And look at all this. Tram lines, everything. It's nonsense. This was here before. You can see the nice cars, but even still pulled by horse. Look there. Nice car, nice wagon, pulled by horse. But they've got the tram lines supposedly working in 1885. But more horses. This is still only about 140 years from now. 140 years ago. They got all these horses, but they built this. Look at that. So it's extensive, and this makes sense why it was the hub. When you saw it was the hub, and of course it's the view from the Masonic Temple. The Freemasons were here, and they know of course about the hub, because the hub was the transit system that extended beyond this to all the different Native American, or whatever you want to call them, pre-civilization, Tartarian, whatever your chosen word is. They use this as their hub. And evidently the people that have just moved here, the Americans or the Europeans at this time, they have no idea what's going on. Look, inhabiting these cities, the technology's already there for them. There's no way that these were fields only 50 years ago. It's impossible. How many people could build this? They've got more builders than people living there. I mean, is everybody in this town a builder? We saw there was only a dozen people in 1837, and yet they've built all of this. Every picture here is taken in 1885, 1885, 1885, so they're all 1885. And you can see, look at this, wow. The train line system, the hub, only 50 years since this place was a field. There was no one here. Absolutely no one here 50 years ago. That's what they want you to believe. And of course it's a high school with a mud flood building windows down here that you can see. And we'll see more mud flood any second, don't worry. I'll show you more evidence of the mud flood. This is the fire station with the powers up here, showing the Antiquitech here, there, and there. Don't forget to like and subscribe before the agents of evil capture you. And of course this, look, the jail. Why waste time with a jail with this? Do you lock people in the tower? Of course not. This is the shape of a water tower. Usually what we would call a water tower. Anyway, we're going to see more about that. So this map says Houston, Texas, 1891. So 60 years, not even 60 years, 54 years after the town was even founded. And this is what it looks like supposedly. Look at that. They've got all the roads going out, already planned for where people are going to live. And all the different buildings that we've just seen, the city hall and the town market. The electric power station. The bank and the safety deposit vaults. The courthouse, of course, looking like a very distinctive church. Why wouldn't it? Evidently a church. Well, that's what they'd have you believe anyway. Energy power station. But look at all this, with all the Antiquitech, there's no need for this, in a town that's only been here for 54 years. 54 years. So it's the hub of Texas already, but it's only been here for 50 years. And we can see the buildings that have been here since 1837. We saw on the map. These have all been here. The only additions have been the small houses. How strange is that? That they've only added small buildings, but all the big buildings, they're all the same as were before on the map. This is because it's a lie. They don't want you to know the truth. Just to refresh your memory, this is from 20 years before that one, and all those buildings are still here. So evidently, they've only constructed smaller houses, because they can't even build the big ones at this point. They've not even figured it out. And I doubt that these train lines were theirs at all. They've just been unearthing them, and they've realized this was a hub, a place for transport. We can see this photo from 1866, which shows it. The buildings are here in 1866. This is only 30 years after the entire place was a field. It was founded. There was no one here, uninhabited. We've got horses, horse and carriage, but all these modern buildings. All the modern buildings, but horse and carriage. Absolutely ridiculous. So for example here they say 1857 this, and in 1857 it looks like this. Okay, so they want you to believe horse and carriage, looking very Wild West almost. Yet in reality they also have these gigantic buildings. So this is 1877. Look at this. The new City Hall and Market House. And we've got people on horse outside. 1877, that's what they want you to believe. But we saw on the maps that they were there from 1860s, 1873, they were all there. So these were all constructed by a town of people with horse and carriage. Where were they getting the bricks from? I want to know that. Where were they getting the bricks for all this? How were they getting it delivered? But of course, this was the hub. This was the hub. Another building, City and Market House. Again, with the drawings of the horse and carriage, yet we built this. This one's 1884. And look at it, the Houston Courthouse. It looks like some kind of church you'd see in Europe. Very Gothic architecture, looking like some kind of cathedral. Another from 1890, this one's the Masonic Temple. Look at that. You can see the Masonic symbol up there and it says 1870. So obviously they've drawn that, but look at the people. Horse and cart. Again, horse and cart. But they've built all this. Now this picture really shows us what's going on because it's from 1928, and we can see from this construction that these buildings go deep beneath the ground. Look here. So as they're doing this construction or deconstruction, as we sometimes say, we can see these buildings actually go much lower onto the ground. This picture shows us from 1895 to 1896, the San Antonio River. And look at this. We can see someone going across, literally in their horse and wagon across the river. And in the background you've got this, looking all destroyed. Look how dystopian it looks. As if something's occurred. As if this place isn't right. There's definitely something going on here around the late 1800s. And this is supposed to be a college. I mean, look at it. There's a man here with his dog. We've got the college and the buildings, etc. But there's nobody here. It's very strange, out in the Wild West. Very weird. And this one as well, the Federal Building. Look at this. Definitely not constructed by our society on horse and wagon. The shape of the building, very complex, going deep into the ground. That's mud flood building if I've ever seen one. And then I wanted to bring your attention as well to the Texas state capitol, because of course we talked about that being in Houston before, but it's actually in Austin nowadays. But if you look at this, it's evidently there from before. Look at this photo. Look at this photo. These people did not build this. And this is what really scares me, because this is supposed to be the goddess of liberty, what the Statue of Liberty is based off. But you know this star. Do you recognize it? Well, it's the Red Star. The Soviet or Russian Red Star. And that raises some very serious questions about who possibly might have owned this area before. Because I didn't want to bring this up, but there are questions about whether the Russians were here first. For example, have you ever asked yourself why the Muscovy duck, which is from the Rio Grande Valley of Texas and Mexico, why is it called the Muscovy duck? Well, of course, Muscovy. Muscovy or Moscovia is Russian, of course, an alternative name for the Principality of Moscow and the Tsardom of Russia. So you have to ask yourself, why is this duck named the Muscovy duck in Texas? And why are we seeing the Soviet Red Star held in the hand of the goddess of liberty at the Texas state capitol, which looks to be in ruin? Lots of questions to be answered. This gives us another view of that building, and it just doesn't make sense. How we were able to construct these things in such a short amount of time. We have these paths here, but then these dirty roads, because these are what we're capable of, and this is what existed before. This is another view of the building, just showing us exactly what we're apparently capable of, but in this Greco-Roman architecture. Who was here before us? That's the question. Who were they, with these gigantic archways? These aren't built for people. And you can't argue they're built for horses either. Much, much bigger. Possibly a very big elephant. Maybe not even that. This gives us a bird's eye view from the capital. And look at the roads. The roads are looking as if there's just been a cataclysm. Dirty, rubble-filled. And yet the buildings are so grand and beautiful. This looks very old, like a castle. But then this looks like something we've built. Very small, very tiny, puny. This is the State University in Austin. Look at it. This one, another example of the type of building that was here before. And we've got horses, of course, horses. But we built this. No construction equipment, no signs of a building site. The trees look ruined, as if something terrible's happened. And another, just showing us the difference just between the roads and the fence. Look at the fence, so basic, so primitive. And yet we built this, with this beautiful spire, which is definitely providing some type of energy. The chimneys for the warmth. And another here, just showing us the type of thing they were really capable of. But again, the primitive fences here, as opposed to this, with the electrical wiring that you can see going directly to the building. So this is in the 1800s. What kind of electrical equipment was inside here, do you reckon? Again, another building showing from the 1800s. This is what they don't want you to see. When we saw that map earlier, they don't show you all these out in the middle of nowhere, barbed wire fence. Look at that, with pieces of wood. Not even shaped well. This looks like it's ripped off a tree. And yet they've built this behind. Some kind of thing going on there, maybe damage to the photo, or possibly some kind of electrical activity going on with these railings here, which were possibly Antiquitech. And this one just speaks volumes, doesn't it? Look at this. All the different wagons and horses, the people visiting, all here. And yet, they've built this. It doesn't make sense, does it? Look at that. With the Antiquitech, but they're using their horse and wagon. Look here. Not a car in sight. How did they do this? Because it was here before. That's what they don't want you to know. It was here before. I keep asking, how did they do this? But it was someone else. It wasn't us. This one again, it shows the railway lines, the tram lines going through the middle of the street. We've got some advertising on this wall here. And the electrical wiring here, very extensive, very neat, much neater than we saw in Philadelphia. And the building, as opposed to the horse and wagon, right below. So these guys built that, of course they did. Don't ask questions. This is a high school, believe it or not. Of course it's a high school. You can see here, high school. All the kids going to school with their mud-flooded building. Much bigger than all these tiny houses around here, looking very basic, but this has got the Antiquitech on the top, looking very pyramid-like. And this structure, what's this? Very curious shape to the chimney there. Possibly some kind of resonance device. And this is another courthouse, so all the courthouses seem to have a similar design that looks like some kind of old castle perhaps. Looks like it should have belonged to the count of the area, Dracula. And again, all these people, not a car in sight, nobody owns a car, they don't know what they are. But they've got horse and wagon, yet they've built this. This beautiful, beautiful building with these huge windows. Stairs leading up, of course, because mud flooded. And the beautiful spire is missing from the top, because perhaps it's been knocked down, or It could be the exposure. But it seems like they don't know how the technology works because they've got this here. This would generate the electricity between each pylon. And then that provides the electricity to this individual section. Like that. This is another courthouse. So look, it has again the courthouse with the same shape. It doesn't make sense. None of it does. Out in the middle we've got a shed here on the side. We can only see a little bit over there as well. Our man walking. Dirt track roads. Absolutely. So they can't even pave the roads. But they can build this. They can't pave the roads. But they can build this and that. But it's absolute nonsense. Again showing us the difference between the walls and the building itself. Look at this, a trench going down there. Evidently mud flood, some kind of barbed wire fence to keep you from going in because there's been damage here. So presumably there was a mud flood here. Maybe this was an old river that was tore through by the mud coming down from the mountains. And this building is what remains. These people don't know what to do. Can anybody guess what this building is? I'll give you $50,000 if you can guess, because it's a courthouse. If you got it right, then make sure to drop a comment down below so I can send you your $50,000. It might take a while. But we can see here definitely Antiquitech. That is, they've left it up. So they'll try and trick you and think it's just a normal spire. But this one shows they've got all the devices installed. These are the separate bits you need to get it working. And that's why the electricity is coming from the building. It's not going to it, it's going from the building. And look outside, look how ruined the trees look. I mean, sure, maybe all these photos were taken in winter. But it seems like every photo has been taken in winter. None of the trees look green or healthy, and the people are very surprised, like he's saying, look at that, look what we've just found. And we can see up here, the electricity is definitely working. And that is Antiquitech. It's a shame about the quality of the photo, because these extra pylons connect with that device there. They come down to this section, the railing around the edge we saw before. And then it channels down through the building, through a metal rod. Some mercury somewhere here, perhaps. And it goes through the metal rod, and it can charge a battery placed inside. This is another courthouse, a completely separate. So these have all been separate courthouses. Believe it or not, they're all separate. But they are looking very similar, aren't they? And look at the people. All on their horses. Dirt track roads. This is a railway. And the railway looks like it's been dug out. And yet look at this. The building itself is pristine. Who's built this? Have they just got expert artisans, architects and Freemasons, all just living inside here, but we don't see them because they're traveling around on their horses? Doesn't make sense, does it? And this one, look. We've got a man up here. He's removed the Antiquitech. It's gone. Look at the pylons are gone. The sections are gone. So this will no longer work. This building has been deactivated by the controllers. And again, look at this one. Wow, this really shows the Antiquitech wired up all the way across, connected to these pylons. Because of course, the energy is coming down from the atmosphere, and they've harnessed it. Look, there's the connection. Coming away, connecting up to here, coming across to here. Lots of different pylons. This is a different type. So we've got the telephone, electricity, different types. But the horse and carriage, again, look, horse and carriage. A man just sat here. So this is all they're capable of. 31st Street looks very damaged. Look, like it's been ripped off. Because something's happened here. This building isn't new. Been damaged. Fortunately, it's maintained its Antiquitech, but I'm presuming that would have been removed soon after. And this was an auditorium, by the way. Forgot to mention. An auditorium. So of course they need this for the sound waves. This is another high school found in Houston, again from the 1800s. Believe it or not, these are the 1800s, where you can tell from the horse and carriage. But then it doesn't match what we're seeing with the architecture, the wires, the cables. None of this makes sense. I want someone to let me know down in the comments below how to make sense of any of this. Because I can't. I mean, I can, I know what's going on. But I'm just being facetious. It's all bullshit. They're lying to you. They're trying to trick you into thinking that they created this. Look, Houston High School. Why the high school? But all the people are living in horse and carriage. So you thought that high school was good? Well, look at this one. Why again? Do we have a high school with these tracks going through? Look at that. Dirt road, but perfectly paved on this side, where they've dug it out. Look at this, ridiculous. Antiquitech up top with some kind of mercury globe. All the electricity powered up. It's coming from the building, see? Coming from the building. And this is the high school again, with the people living in dirty roads. This photo says 1895 to 1896. And it says the elevator. And the elevator has a picture of two ships in front of an office building. That's how it's described, as an office building. Very odd shape to this office. But in the late 1800s, this was some type of office. Very strange. Looks as if there was more to this building, because there's evidently a door. It's not a window, it's the door. So why is there a door on the top floor? Doesn't make sense. So I think we'll call that the end of the video. I think it's pretty clear that these buildings were here before. This is all nonsense that they're trying to teach you. We were using these horse and wagons. See, this is what I was talking about. I forgot to show you, but we'll bring it up in the next video. Horse and wagon drawing their carts, you see? So they had the roads. They had the tram lines already there. But they didn't know how to use the electrics. Look how damaged this looks. So what do? They get a horse, and the horse pulls the carriage until they figured out the electrics. And once they figured out the electrics, they were able to get it going. So I should have brought that up, but I completely forgot. We'll bring it up in another video. But definitely, that's exactly what was happening there. So let me know what you thought about this in the comments down below. I'm very interested. The controllers want you to believe that this place was uninhabited. Absolutely no one there. From the late 1700s until the 1830s, when a dozen people turned up, and then they built a town within a couple of weeks. So does that sound normal to you? Or is that bullshit? That's what I'm thinking. It seems like absolute nonsense. And we're going to be going into more of these cities and showing you how the history of America, it isn't what you've been told. And fortunately, you've got me to bring you the truth. So thank you guys, I'll catch you all on the next episode of Old World USA with me, your host, Stephen Jackson.